Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Deep and Effective Big Book Study. I'm your host, a recovered alcoholic. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be episode 8, which is going to be part 2 of Bill's story. If you tuned into part 1, I really appreciate it. Here in part 2, we're going to leave sick Bill and move into recovered Bill. And we're going to have some amazing stuff to talk about within his story. As always, my friends, we are going to invite God into this and open up with the set-aside prayer. So if you want to take a moment of silence and join me, we'll get right to it. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the 12 steps, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Okay, fantastic. All right, we've got God in, and I'm going to read from page 25. And there's a solution, middle of the page. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. All right, my friends, so I'm dropping my email here. It's recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. Open for questions, comments, concerns. As always, I want to offer my hand in sponsorship for men and women. Guys, I can take you through this work, help you get a spiritual experience. Ladies, I can get you hooked up with some other women. If you haven't had an opportunity to hit that subscribe button, please do. It really helps out the channel. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in the 2 meetings that I attend weekly. One is on Thursdays. It's an all-men's step study. We meet Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central. Here is the Zoom code and password. Another meeting that I attend is on Sundays at 6 p.m. Central. It's men and women, and it's another big book study. If you're interested in looking for some real solution-based meetings, we would love to have you. So come on by. So if you tuned in for part 1 of Bill's story, you know that we stopped on the top of page 8. Because the reason we did that is we wanted to split Bill's story into 2 parts, right? We wanted to talk about the sick Bill, and now we're going to be talking about recovered Bill, right? And we have to understand everything that led us up to page 8 is the example of how self-will and self-knowledge and the hopelessness of alcoholism, we were establishing all these things within Bill. And what I really need to be doing is seeing if I'm establishing these things within myself, right? By the time we get to page 8, Bill Wilson is absolutely hopeless. He is without power to do anything about his problem. And this is my story as well. You know, we're going to read Bill Wilson's first step experience on this page. And it just so happens that it looks exactly like my first step experience. So we're going to start back on page 8 with the paragraph, no words. You there? Okay. So this is what Bill tells. This is one of the most pivotal paragraphs in the entire book. At least it is for me. No words can tell the loneliness and despair I found in the bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. This is Bill Wilson's first step experience. In this moment, Bill Wilson admits complete and utter defeat. He meets the requirement of the principle behind the first step, which is honesty and humility. He is out of fight. Alcoholism has finally beat him into a state of reasonableness. Can you relate to that? Can you relate to trying to bombard your entire life with self-will and it ain't working? Can you relate to that? Because this is what this paragraph, the essence of it, is all about. Is that I truly come to believe, or like page 30 says, I've conceded to my innermost self that I'm hopeless. So powerful. And I'm going to keep reading. Listen to what he says here. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear showed me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, because that's what alcoholism is. It's insidious insanity. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. See, we've already established that Bill Wilson is going to either have to be locked up or they're going to bury his ass. Cage or a coffin. This is his two options. And yet, here he is, still drinking. This is just such a great example of the proof that there is no consequence great enough to keep us sober. There is no consequence great enough to keep me sober. There is no promise great enough to keep me sober. Right? I hear this all the time in meeting, this nonsense phrase of the no matter what club, the just don't drink no matter. And here's the thing, is that if you're the real alcoholic like me, you're going to drink no matter what. This is what alcoholism is about, is that I don't have a choice. It couldn't be more clear. Holy shit, if I could just not drink, you think I'd be here? If you think if Bill Wilson could just not drink, that the program would have ever been conceived? Of course not. It's nonsense. Keep reading. And Bill says, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or I would stumble on to the miserable end. Again, cage or a coffin. And that's hopeless. But we're about to get into some hope. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted in what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and useless in a way of life which is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And I talk about this paragraph in the episode with the third option, right? Because this is my hope. My hope is the fourth dimension. That's all I can hang my hat on. Let's get into where Ebby's now about to come see him. So it's very, very vital, important stuff. Near the end of the bleak November, bleak means hopeless. November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. See, that's the mental obsession, right? The only thing that matters in me is to make sure I got all my bases covered for my drinking. It's also selfish, because the only thing that I am thinking about is how I'm going to get my drink. See, he's not talking about, he's not certain satisfaction about Lois and what a wonderful wife he has. He's talking about, I'm going to be able to feed self. I'll keep going. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. See, that's alcoholism. He's consumed. And then we get into where Ebby's gives old Bill a call, and Ebby's going to come over as Bill. And if you don't know who Ebby Throckmorton Thatcher is, him and Bill were buddies their whole lives. They drank together. They were in business together. They were thick as thieves, him and Ebby. So this is what he says. This is very important stuff we get into. It says, my musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. See how it's written in italicized? Is that right? Yeah, italicized. It was years since I could remember him coming to New York in that condition. Listen to what Bill says. I was amazed. Like, what? What are you talking about? Ebby, you're drunk like me. What do you mean you're sober? Rumor had it he'd been committed for alcoholic insanity. Again, remember, alcoholism is a form of insanity. It says, I wondered how he had escaped. Well, the answer's in the question, my friends. If you're wondering how you're going to escape this thing, you just have to look closer at the question. And it's right here, HOW, honesty, open mind, and willingness. That's how I'm going to escape. Of course he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought of only recapturing the spirit of other days. See how selfish he is? This is his lifelong buddy, and he didn't give two shits about anything other than himself drinking. And he goes on to talk about there was a time he had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. About some profound information we're about to gather right here. He says the door opened and he stood there. Fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. If this isn't highlighted in your book, it needs to be. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? That's a question mark. Okay, Bill Wilson has known this man his entire life. But when the door opens, he's basically saying he doesn't even recognize this man. And he's describing what is going on with Ebby. Fresh skin and glowing, something about his eyes, inexplicably different. What had happened? I'll tell you what happened. Ebby recovered. See, Bill Wilson's standing there looking at a recovered alcoholic, and he ain't never seen one before, and it's blowing his mind. I'll keep going. He says he wasn't himself. Exactly. Ebby's been taken out of alcoholism and moved into something greater than we could ever imagine. Ebby is a recovered alcoholic. Of course he's not himself anymore. I'm not myself anymore. That's why recovered and recovering, there's a difference. I'm not sick. Keep reading. Come on, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply and smiling, and said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Again, it's in the eyes. Recovered alcoholic has that light back on in the eyes, man. I said, yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. Let me ask you something, my viewers and listeners out there. Do I sound like I'm on fire with this thing? You're damn right I do. Because that's what happens to an individual when they truly get a hold of this thing. You will sound like this. You won't want to shut up about it. Because when you get the power of God into you and you recover from a disease that's going to kill you, there ain't nothing left to do but be on fire about it. And he says, bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gym would last longer than his preaching. Again, selfish, selfish, selfish. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. This was the Oxford Group and the Four Absolutes. He said that was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked, self-evident. And he says 2 months? What do you mean? Ebby's 2 months sober, and he's already trying to find an alcoholic to carry the message to? Oh my God, all this horse shit we hear in meetings about how long you have to have before you can carry the message? It's nonsense. See, this idea that we're supposed to be waiting for something before we can take action in this program, right? The very thing that's going to save my life, carrying the message to the newcomer, that's the thing that's going to save my life. And you want to tell me to hold off to do that? Okay, we have the medicine that you can recover from alcoholism, but we're going to make you wait a while before you take it. Do you see how ludicrous that sounds? Listen to what he says on the model. He'd come to pass his experience, not his opinions, along to me if I cared to have him. Right? Do I really want this? Not even about need. I've needed Alcoholics Anonymous since I was 13. I didn't want it till I was 41. As he says, I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. You know, on page 10 and first half of 11, you know, Bill talks about his agnosticism and all his doubts and prejudices, and I can totally share all that with him as well. And all that's irrelevant, right? My spiritual religious viewpoints are really irrelevant when it comes to this thing. It's about, do I believe I'm hopeless enough to be willing to try something different? So I'm going to pick back up on 11 in the middle. It says, but my friend sat before me and made the point-blank declaration. What's outside the scope of that? Point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. Then we're going to read Ebby's first step experience. Listen to what he says. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like himself, he admitted complete defeat. That's Ebby's first step experience. This is the requirements that I had to meet as well to be successful in this thing. And just like Bill talks about on 8, then suddenly, when he talks about he's going to get rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, listen to what Ebby says. Then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he'd ever known. Exclamation point. This is just like Bill Wilson's experience on page 8, and it's just like my experience. He said, had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in that minute, and this was none at all. That floored me. It began as though religious people were right after all. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in the human heart which had done the impossible. See, recovering from alcoholism is impossible without God. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle. A recovered alcoholic is a miracle. And that's what Ebby is sitting across the table from him. He's a miracle. So let's jump over to page 12. Again, I could turn this episode into 2 hours worth of talking about this chapter, but I have to condense and I have to go with what's speaking to me in the moment. And I have to make sure that we capture what's getting ready to happen. So in the middle of the page on 12, Ebby says, my friend suggested what seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And I got to tell you, this is one of the most overlooked gifts that the program offers, right? Not only do we get an opportunity to choose our own conception of God, it's actually encouraged. You see, part of the steps instructions is that we need to have a God of our understanding. It's in the 3rd step and it's the 11th step. It's part of the instructions, right? I'm just not going to go into this thing blindly. You understand? Now, if you already have a conception that's working for you, congratulations, good for you. But for all of you out there who do not have a conception that's working for you, well, here is a gift. See, I get an opportunity to strip away all these old broken ideas and these prejudices that I've carried with me, and just poor beliefs. I get to get rid of all, shed all that, and I can start from the ground floor and rebuild something that makes sense to me, right? I can make something that I can build a relationship with. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have, and we never talk about it in the meetings. And I'll pick up on 12 again. It says, it was only a matter of willing to believe in a power greater than yourself. Nothing more was required for me to make it be. So this is actually the instructions for step 2, but this is Bill Wilson taking his step 2 instructions right here. Nothing more was required for me to make a beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friends. Would I have it? Of course I would. So as you're watching this video right now, you're seeing the wonderfully effective spiritual structure. Well, this is one of the first building blocks that we get to erect that structure. And when it talks about on a foundation of complete willingness. So if you look at the cornerstone in this structure is the W. The cornerstone of recovery is the willingness. And now we're about to get into Bill Wilson's step 2 experience. It says, thus I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. Very, very important word is that want. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. This is Bill Wilson's step 2 experience. He had his first step experience on page 8, and now he's having his second step experience on page 12. He says, the real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. So he just gave us the instructions. He just gave us the ingredients on how to have a step 2 experience. We have to bring the need and the want together, right? I needed God my whole life, but I never wanted him. Can you understand that? The need is not enough. I have to marry it with the want. So what Bill tells us on the bottom of 12 here is that he brings the need and the want together for the very first time. Then he sprinkles in some of these foundation principles of willingness and humility and honesty. And God comes. Instantaneous. And this is exactly what happened in my life. I brought the need and the want together for the first time. I was humble enough to do it. I was willing enough to do it. I was honest enough to do it. And this is how I had a step 2 experience. He's now about to tell us exactly how to get God back out of my life. But soon, the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly within myself. My worldly clamors, that's my pride, my ego, my prejudices, my resentments, and my fears, and all this crap that I build up inside of me that blocks this power. So if I want God, I have to practice humility and willingness and honesty and all these other foundation principles. If I want to get rid of God, all I got to do is go back to being ate up with self. And listen to what he says. And so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. Oh my God, how blinded I had been. You know, I'm one of those people that came into AA and was, I don't want to talk about God. I don't want to hear about God. The hell with you and God, and I meant it. Right? And I start getting in this program. I start trying to apply these steps in my life. And I'm like, where's this God y'all keep talking about? I'm looking everywhere for him. And then what happened is one day he tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and there he was. And I discovered in that moment that God had been with me my whole life. How blind I had been. I spent a lifetime demanding evidence of this God. But the reality of it is it was everywhere. And now I can't unsee the evidence of God. So powerful. All right, we're on page 13, my friends. And if you're not aware that this is Bill Wilson goes through steps 3 through 11 on this page. Now, you have to remember, they didn't have the steps. What they had is the 4 absolutes. But if you get into the Oxford Group's 4 absolutes and you study them, you will see the basis of all the 12 steps within the 4 absolutes. They had the need for confession, the need for inventory, the need for service, the need for restitution. All this stuff is within the 4 absolutes. And I'm going to read verbatim. I'm going to read this whole page because we have to break it down and show you where every step happens. So remember, we've already had a step 1 on page 8. We've had step 2 on page 12. Now we're on page 13. He says, there I humbly offered myself to God as I then understood him. To do with me as he would, I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. Well, what step is that? What step do we humbly offer ourselves to God? That's right, step 3. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, without him I was lost. So that's that reaffirmation of step 1 right there. He admitted, I am nothing without God. He says, I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since. Okay, well, what step do we face our sins, our character defects? That's step 4. That's right. It says, became willing. What steps deal with the removal of character defects? That's right, 6 and 7, they're right there. And then he says, my newfound friend. And you notice that the word friend is capitalized. Who's he referring to? It's not Ebby. I'm talking about God. You see, the reason that Bill Wilson on 10 and 11 is talking about his agnosticism, right? He goes into, he's fed up with religion and all the stuff that goes with it, right? Because he doesn't have a good conception of God. But at the bare minimum, he can see that this God of his understanding needs to be at least his friend. And that's exactly how I had to start, right? If I'm going to turn my will and my life over to this something or whatever, don't you think it needs to be my friend? And don't you think that I'm able to define the qualities of a friend? Right? My friends need to be loyal and trusting and forgiving and honest and non-judgmental. Right? We could go on and on and on about how many the characteristics we come up for a friend. That's what God needs to be to me. And he is. I need to be able to rely on this power. I understand that this power has nothing but the best interest in mind for me. Keep going. And then he says, I haven't had a drink since. Right? He hasn't had a drink since because of this friend with a capital letter F, God, took this away from him. That's the only way this works. Keep going. My schoolmate visited me, and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. So Ebby shows back up at the hospital, and what step do we fully acquaint another person with all of our crap? That's right, the 5th step. We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I felt resentment. Right? Well, what step is that? We make a list of all people we've hurt. That's right, step 8. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them, and I was to right all such matters to the utmost of my ability. Again, he's talking about the amends process. Step 9. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. Well, what step is that? Step 10. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore on my uselessness to others. Then only might I expect to receive. Well, what step is that? Sit quietly in doubt. Prayer and meditation. Step 11. There you have it. So, we have 1 through 11 so far. We're going to be missing 1. It's coming, though. Bottom of 13. My friend promised when these things, what things? Well, these things that we just read, these steps, when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship. So whatever relationship you think you got coming in the door, it ain't going to serve you because it ain't served you yet. I have to redefine my relationship with this power. Because everything that I need from here on has to be new because the old doesn't work. Upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. What is outside the scope of that? All of my problems. And here it is. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Oh my God. So he says the belief in the power of God, right? So my faith, I need that, but that's not enough. I need more. I need willingness, honesty, and humility. I need the foundation principles. I need faith with works. You understand? I have to apply these principles into my life. 14 says simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. So I hear this all the time that sobriety is a free gift, and I'm here to tell you it's not. There's a price that has to be paid. Bill Wilson talks about it in his story. Dr. Bob talks about the price that has to be paid in his story. Alcoholic number 3. Bill Dobson talks about the price that has to be paid in his story. Right? And just not drinking and going to meetings don't pay the price. Here's the price that I got to pay. Simple but not easy. Your price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must, there's again one of those musts that they tell you don't exist in the book, turn in all things to the Father of light, who presides over us all. And how do I destroy self-centeredness? Well, I do that through the steps because that's what's going to give me ego deflation. I break down that ego, that selfishness and that pride and all that crap gets destroyed. That's what the steps are designed to do. Listen to what he says. These are revolutionary and drastic proposals. You're damn right they're drastic. Oh my God, I walk into the meeting and look at those steps on the wall and I'm like, okay, you want me to 4 and 5? Oh no, I don't want to go talk to somebody or write a bunch of stuff. I don't want to have to go knock on people's doors and make amends. But how free do you want to be? But listen to what he says. But the moment I fully accepted them. See, this is that when... See, there's 2 types of people that walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's people that are done and the people that aren't done. And the people that are done are the ones who make it. Period. If you're not done, you're not going to fully accept what you're going to have to do to recover. Because if you're not done, you're not truly hopeless yet. So the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. Session to drink was removed. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity I had never known. Boy, that's my life too. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. All right, so still on page 14, and we've had 1 through 11 with Bill as far as steps. So now we're going to read Bill Wilson's inspiration for the 12th step. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there was thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others. Again, we're not even into the steps. And they're telling me the solution for alcoholism. Doctor's opinion told me the solution for alcoholism. It's God and its service. because there ain't nothing else. And listen to what he says here, right? He said the thought came, where did this thought come from? Right? You see, on the previous page, he just took the steps and got unblocked from this power. Right? He is now be able to channel the voice of God. So the thought comes from God. And God said, Bill, you get off your ass and go help other alcoholics now. That's what God told him. And then you tell them that they need to do the same thing. That's what this thought is. So powerful. And again, the last paragraph on this page demonstrates exactly what we're talking about. He said, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity. What is outside the scope of the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs? Again, I have to know what these principles are before I can even practice them in my affairs. Particularly, it was imperative. It's a pretty powerful word, isn't it? To work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. And here it is. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. So when he says that if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, stop right there. Because now he's going to tell me exactly how I do that. It's through work and self-sacrifice for others. That's how I perfect and enlarge my spiritual life, is God and being of service. And drinking and going to meetings don't have a damn thing to do with perfecting and enlarging my spiritual life. Let me go ahead and finish up. Because he could not survive the certain trials and low spots. What are they talking about? Trials and low spots. What is trials and low spots? It's just life. I'm not going to survive life. Trials and low spots are going to show up whether I'm drunk or sober. But do I have a set of tools today that's going to help me deal with that? If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. That's a promise. Just as true as the 9-step promises on page 83 and 84. For us to drink is to die. That's what I have to believe in step 1. So I'm going to read a little bit more off of page 15. So my wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. So if you're not being enthusiastic about the idea of being of service, you're doing it wrong. It's that simple. Because I'm here to tell you, when you get a hold of this thing and you actually get to carry the message and watch another man, another woman start to recover and watch the light come on in their eyes, you can't be anything but enthusiastic about this. It was fortunate for my old business associate to remain skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time. I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. See, Bill Wilson didn't say he was hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. That's what caused him to want to go back to drink. That's horse shit. He said that he got filled with resentment and self-pity. See, he's choked up again. He's blocked off from that power. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up on my feet. It's designed for living, which works in rough going. Listen to what he just said to us. Right? You ever heard the expression or some version of it, if your ass falls off, you pick it up and take it to a meeting, right? Well, no. Bill Wilson says, if my ass falls off, I'm going to pick it up and go find another alcoholic to work with. Right? This whole idea that I need a meeting is one of the most selfish things that can come out of my mouth. What I need to do is go be of service. I need a meeting. That's about taking. But he says, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. What measures? What measures is he talking about? Half measures. See, the reason that he's choked up with self-pity and resentment is because of half measures. It's because he's resting on his laurels, because he's not taking daily inventory. That's why the self-pity and resentment has returned. He's not keeping it in check. And this is the thing that's going to cause me to drink again. not because I didn't call my sponsor enough, not because I didn't go to enough meetings, not because I didn't read the daily reflection or any other crap that we hear. The only thing that's ever going to cause me to drink again is if I stop living the daily disciplines of 10 and 11, taking that inventory where these character defects will come back into my life and keep me blocked from the power that keeps me sober. That's the only thing that will ever get me drunk. So I'm going to pick up on the last sentence on page 15 because there's important information. It says, we meet frequently so that the newcomer may find the fellowship they seek. So who's the meeting for? It's for the newcomer, right? You know, we hear so much talk about meetings. And I got to tell you, meetings is not the program, right? The program don't have a damn thing to do with me going to a whole bunch of meetings. And if we take the book in its entirety, the first 164 pages, ask yourself this question right here, right now. How much space, how much black ink, how much time did they devote telling us to go into meetings? Do you know? Because if you add it all up, you're going to only get about 2 paragraphs. And here's 1 sentence of it right here. The rest of it comes in chapter A Vision for You, all the way on page 159. See, the entire book, the entire steps, everything, never mentions meetings. Because that's not what's going to keep me sober. And I'm going to do a whole episode on meetings. Let's go over to page 16 and finish up, guys. I'm going to read this whole last bit. It says, an alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are various and strenuous, comic and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there is a deadly earnestness. And that's kind of the thought process I like to take with this whole thing. Right? This is life or death. Right? This is not. We're not going to sugarcoat life or death. Right? This is all business. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. That's a promise. What's outside the scope of that promise? Perish means death. Most of us feel to look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself into a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. So that's part 2 of Bill's story. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. I got to tell you, I get so fired up and I just get so enthusiastic when I'm studying this book. It just brings me such a source of inspiration. Because it's had such a profound impact on my life. So from the bottom of page 164, may God bless and keep you till then. Y'all take care.